And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the monastery, the open bar of the internet, the world's greatest shit show, and the place where we, the good brothers and sisters of this most holy of temples, seek enlightenment through the drunkest, craziest, and most batshit ways possible. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me, I have a newcomer into the temple, coming to us as part of the umbrella of Newborn Games, and the creator of Just Roll With It, a habit-forming behavioral tome using role-playing as a medium. The one and only Ariel Levari. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me here. It's it's a pleasure to be here chatting with you.
Mm-hmm. So, I realized that this was a little bit unorthodox compared to some of the past stuff I've had in this monastery, but I would be remiss if I didn't go through the origin story question as I do with everybody their first time. So, walk me through your first introduction to role-playing games and what made it stick.
Yeah, I mean, I would say my first real introduction to role playing was more through video games, which I think is probably a common theme among many people on your channel. But things like Skyrim, a lot of the Bethesda games, and then along with that, Baldur's Gate, which I've been actually playing a lot of the recent one and loving that recently. And then sometime, let's see. I think I actually got into D&D a little bit later in life, probably sometime around university, and played a couple of campaigns with friends, and then just got kind of more into that space in general, and listened to a bunch of the podcasts. And in terms of what really made it stick, was, well, one, it's just fun as hell, and I love it. So there's that. But two, I felt like so my background's in psychology, and I always love just kind of thinking about activities that I can do that can potentially aid me in other areas of my life as well. And I noticed the more that I played role-playing games in general, kind of the more creative I felt, the quicker on my feet I was, the more inventive I was when challenging things came my way. And I just kind of liked the way it made me feel. So I was like, one, this is super fun. Two, it actually seems to kind of help me in other things as well and makes me just a more confident, more creative person. So those combined made me want to stick with it and create something in that space as well.
Mm-hmm. Which is certainly fine, and it is amusing that you bring up Skyrim because I've kind of hinted at this. On one level or another, the Elder Scrolls series has been my whipping boy.
Oh yeah, and what sense? Give me your rundown.
Well, for starters, the Gamebryo/creation engine is a leaning tower of Pisa at the best of times.
Fair enough.
I know that Bethesda claims that the creation engine that was used in like Starfield is a brand new iteration of it, but I trust Todd Howard as far as I can throw him.
Yeah, it's probably pretty similar, would be my guess, but
like, creation is not a new engine, it's a rejiggered version of their previous engine, Gamebryo. It was not really built with 7th generation console infrastructure in mind. This Gamebryo was it first started to make its rounds in the PS3 and 360 era. And even then it struggled. Its origins even go back further than that. But I liken it to the Leaning Tower of Pisa because that tower leans due to a foundation of wet soil.
Well, for all that, it still had quite a formative role in my life. So.
And, yeah, formative things can happen, but I'm an equal opportunity roaster. But the other thing is, even the biggest diehard is not going to defend the combat, especially if you go melee. And one argument that I've heard for years is you can't do good melee combat in first person. anyone who tells you that is full of shit.
Yeah,
Because
I
it's
would agree.
it's been done. We've had cases of it being done since 2000.
Sure. Yeah, it doesn't seem that novel of a thing, but
No,
yeah.
I mean Kingdom Come is doing it. There was Breakdown back in 2004 that did it. There was Mach-N X in 2000 on the Dreamcast that did it. But I think it's important to keep to, even with stuff that is that may have had a foundational thing, to keep that kind of thing in check. Like, don't get me wrong, I like plenty of things in Skyrim and the Elder Scrolls universe in general. I've made frequent memes about how Pelennor Whitestrake is the biggest elf hater in the universe. Uh, I think there was a video I saw once that went into him, and he didn't show up in Skyrim all that much, but he's well known within that universe. Someone had said in the comments, "The existence of casual racism implies the existence of competitive racism, and I intend to win."
Oh man.
Because, well, he did cause an entire coast worth of elves to not be around. So,
And a lot of them. Yeah. No, my callback to the lore isn't quite where yours are, so I'll take your word for that.
yeah. I will just say that no matter how much you think you hate elves, and there are plenty of reasons to hate elves in fantasy settings, he hates them more.
Fair enough.
But now, with that kind of thing in mind, uh, this is an interesting approach of taking a role-playing approach to behavioral change, and I'm guessing things like behavioral science is part of your particular your particular trade.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, my background is in organizational psychology specifically, but then I worked in corporations for the last 5-6 years, doing a lot of research on behavioral science, behavior change, habit formation, nudging, various things like that. That was kind of my main wheelhouse.
Oh yeah, I can definitely get that. So walk me through kind of the process that led to the idea of even making this book. Was it just culminating some of the things that you had been doing up until that point?
Yeah, I mean, I've always kind of messed around with trying to like gamify my own habits to some extent, and the kind of one of my biggest challenges just working for big corporations was feeling like I, you know, I had so much knowledge around what the right things to do were, but I often felt like I wasn't really applying them directly to my life. And it's kind of hypocritical to tell people to do all these things if you're not actually doing it yourself. So I wanted to try to start messing around with systems of gamification, of making habit change, of making learning new behaviors a little bit more fun. And I started just like with the most bare bones sort of thing of like each day I would write down a couple of behaviors and then roll a dice to see which of them I would do, just to add a little bit of variability to my routines. And then it kind of just snowballed from there. And I kind of had an interesting chapter in my life where I ended up leaving the corporate world and moving across the world to Portugal, and had a little bit of free time on my hands, and then started actually writing this in earnest and trying to really build out a whole world and narrative that could support my desire to kind of gamify habits and make it a little bit more joyful, just more engaging, more full of like magic and fun and all these other things that I felt like were kind of a little bit missing in a lot of what was out there.
Mm-hmm. And I could see it. I mean, I do remember when I got back into fitness, there was one attempt at doing workouts that styled itself as a hero's journey, but
Mm-hmm.
uh, and maybe this is something you ended up encountering, and it's something I've talked about in the past when it comes to quote unquote educational games, that a lot of them forget the game part of that name and just end up
Yeah,
being glorified
yeah,
flashcards, or not really embracing the more gamified aspects. Um,
totally. I mean, that was one of my core insights early on. Like there are tons of apps out there. I'm sure you've seen some of them, like whether it's Habitica or even people reference Duolingo and the various badges and stuff you get. But like a lot of them to me felt very much like you're just slapping on a thin veneer of badges and points to something that is just fundamentally like a to-do list, and didn't feel particularly compelling or lacked the kind of narrative that actually made you want to find out what happens next, continue progressing, and all of that sort of stuff.
hmm uh, like it, this is the reason why my gold standard for educational games was always the old MECC games back on the Apple, and later on
I don't
PC.
think I've ever encountered this. Yeah.
Um, you've probably seen the memes of one of them, that being the Oregon Trail.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. Yep.
Yeah. Um, but that was one example. The other big one was Number Munchers, and a bunch of different variants of that. There were other games that studio made, but those are the big ones.
Interesting. Okay.
And
Yeah.
the key thing with it is that even if they're trying to be educational, they don't forget the fact that that at the end of the day, this is still a game.
Right.
And
Yep.
how do you? And since we're talking about using the medium of role playing, how do you approach that so that it doesn't fall into that trap of feeling like a glorified flashcard, or the same thing but um, with a fantasy coat of paint?
Yeah.
Not to disparage anybody, but it's that pattern that we see.
Totally. Totally. And I mean, to be totally forthright, that is an ongoing challenge, and I'm still working on refining this up to the last moment to make that actually the case. But I'd say there's a couple of main things that I'm trying to do. One is that it so you start by picking a character. I draw a
Mhm.
lot of inspiration from Dungeons and Dragons and whatnot, and there's kind of the standard classes you might expect to see, and you pick a character, flesh that out a bit, and sort of depending on which character you pick, there's different focuses of like different areas in your life that you might be wanting to improve upon, whether it be like strength, like exercise, all of that stuff, or like creativity or learning, or you can pick a lot of broad various areas to focus your life on. But then as you sort of embark on your journey, each day there's a map, and you move to a different square on that map. So in that sense, it's sort of like a kind of like a choose your own adventure type
Mhm.
mechanic. And based on where you land in the back of the book, there are different things that happen.
Yeah.
There's kind of an index type system, and you flip to the back. And then in those encounters, a lot of different things can happen. So there can be like an encounter where you have to roll some dice, and there will be an enemy, and there's sort of this like threshold type mechanic where depending on your level, the enemy's level, you have to roll above certain things, and if you fail to do so, you take damage. And then there's like all the standard XP, GP, HP, all of that you might expect to see. But then there's also some weird, like quirky things that will come up, like one character will lose something in a maze, and there will be like a page that actually has a maze on it with a time limit where you have to try to solve that maze before a certain amount of time in order to get the reward. And then there's also the fact that there's sort of like a evolving story. There's some mysterious evil force that has corrupted the land, and as you progress through this map, you're kind of trying to figure out what's actually going on in this world. What is the darkness? Like, why are the minions of him, interacting with you in certain strange ways? So there's kind of like a puzzling it together piece as well.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'd say kind of the like, there's pretty standard game dice rolling mechanics, and you're getting items, points, all of that sort of stuff. But then there's also the kind of evolving narrative and exploration along the way. And then there's all the like actual kind of sciencey stuff that you're trying out new ideas, learning principles, applying them to your life, etc. But we can get onto that in the next question. Yeah.
But it's the way you describe it. It's you already mentioned the choose your own adventure games, but it also sounds like this is dipping into the same pool that you see journaling games, like solo journaling games, which
Totally.
we have been seeing a growing amount of over the last 6 years. We saw a whole lot more crop up post-pandemic for kind of obvious reasons, I guess.
Yeah.
But there has been an upswing in solo game books over the last half decade. I know that it'd be very tempting to chalk that up to the after effects of the pandemic, but I think the foundations were put there for a while.
Yeah, it seems like it's been building towards that for a little while, and I definitely have. I to be honest, I never got that into any of the solo journaling RPGs. I felt like I kind of loved the engaging elements of working with others. And I know that's a little bit contradictory that I created a solo journaling RPG essentially, but I wanted something that was working with others or maybe working towards something a little bit more tangible, and that was why I decided to create this book. Not that in any way to invalidate solo journaling RPGs as they standardly are, because I know they can be a blast and a ton of people love them, so all for it. But yeah, I messed around, I don't know, with Apothecaria a little bit, the 1,000-Year-Old Vampire. Yeah, had some fun with those sorts of things.
Yeah. I can get that. But within that, since you're going to be doing a bunch of jumping between matters, is there because I'm assuming that with the rewards there's going to be a digital version. With that one, do you plan on putting bookmarks and hyperlinks?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's pretty critical. And the version that I currently have, the latest one, has a good amount. I'm trying to add even more to make it as clickable as possible, because you're right, like if you don't have those hyperlinks, you're going to be scrolling a shit ton, which no one wants to do. So yeah, top of my mind.
Yeah, and it's definitely something I can see. I think the other thing is that it's important to have proper navigation. This is something I get on a lot of games and books about. Primarily because of the fact that one of my early experiences with RPGs was Rifts, and Rifts is notorious for navigation problems. Like having a table of contents with a bunch of inaccuracies.
Got it.
But I think another thing is because of the fact that there are certain mechanics that you're kind of going into in certain loops. Within the back of the book, do you, in like an appendix or something like that, do you plan on having a sort of cheat sheet?
Yeah, there's going to be two things that'll help you with that. So like the instructions start off. I tried to do it in kind of a fun, user-friendly way, where essentially like you play through 3 days of the journal in a very guided format. So there's day 1, 2, 3. Each day you learn sort of a different set of mechanics and principles, both in terms of the game and in terms of the kind of science that you're going to be applying to your life. But then at the end of that, there's going to be a kind of a quick start guide that'll just have most of the information bulleted out. And then at the back of the book as well, there's a glossary of terms that just kind of lists everything that you might need to know if you want to quickly look up something should you forget what it means.
Yeah, and I think another thing that's equally important, especially for a game book or just games in general, is the fact that this is something that needs a degree of replayability, as people, reference it for learning habits and the like.
Yep.
And obviously there's things like the heroic callings. You have the stuff like the character sheet, which I do hope you plan on making the character sheet into a separate printable
yeah,
PDF.
for sure.
Um,
Yep.
At the very least, also have it in the back of the book. That's kind of standard policy.
Yeah.
But
yeah, just about everything's gonna have a printable version as well. But yeah, sorry, go on.
But I think it's important to have it that somebody could go through the 3 days at the very least once, then go through it again and get a somewhat different experience. Not completely different, but not a complete retread either.
Right. Yeah. So a couple of things there is like, the thing is designed to take 60 to 90 days. And there are, more areas and encounters on the map than you will likely experience. So depending on which trajectory you go through, you'll have slightly different events happen. And also depending on which character you pick, and which area of life you're trying to focus on, there's going to be like different, what I'm calling spells, which are essentially like the kind of scientific psychological principles that you're going to be applying to your life. There are different sets of those that you're recommended to learn, and you locate those by moving to different areas on the map and interacting with different creatures. So therefore, depending on which class you're picking, you're kind of likely to have a couple of different experiences as you try to learn these principles. And then on top of that, my long-term vision, my dream is to kind of have this be a plug-and-play system where, I can develop additional maps and release those online to anyone who's bought in the book. And then there are, a whole new set of encounters. So, you already have the core book that you can journal in and write in and keep track of stuff. And then you can download a fresh new map with a whole list of different experiences as well. So that's a little down the road. I haven't quite fully fleshed that out, but that would be the vision there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can certainly see that. And when it comes to the idea of the roster of heroes, I noticed that you went with a lot of the traditional archetypes, including monk. So I'm going to be naturally biased.
Yep. Yeah. I figured it just made the most sense to stick with people who, or with archetypes that people are already fairly familiar with, and that was kind of an ongoing quandary of mine. Is I really wanted to make this book fun and relatable for people who are into role playing, TTRPGs, all that sort of stuff, as well as people who maybe haven't picked up games. So it just kind of finding that balance of being like, there's enough references to things that gamers might find familiar, but also it's not too deep in lore to make it unapproachable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think something else that certainly helps is the way you've written it out is using a kind of narrator perspective with a lot of the material, in the same way that you have in some video games, and obviously in TTRPGs you have the way the narrator or GM is describing what you're seeing, kind of stuff.
Correct. Yep. 100%.
And also, I'm looking through all the pages that you have of some of the sheets, and yeah, I do hope all of this is in a separate PDF, because there's quite a lot of them, and you made some attempt at them being form fillable, which I certainly appreciate. That always makes my job easy.
Yes. Yep.
Mm-hmm. But
I think sorry, go for it.
But I think the other thing is building around the Arcanum thing. I'm guessing this is where a lot of the Skyrim DNA comes in, because you have them as constellations.
Correct. Yes, that was very much drawn from there.
Mm-hmm. And was it a case where when it came to designing the arcanums, there were some that had to be overhauled because it didn't quite work as intended?
The arcanums, I am actually, that was kind of the last piece to fit in. And I am still working on refining that and testing it right up until now. So the version you're looking at is a little bit different from the latest one. But yeah, that is proven to be by far the most difficult part of this whole endeavor, because it's like I wanted to give people enough structure and enough guidance around what sort of principles might help them out in pursuing whatever their calling is, whatever they're trying to work on in their life, but also give it enough flexibility that they can kind of adapt and mess around. And I really wanted it to have like the essence of experimentation, where you're like, I don't think there's often a one size fits all solution for people. So I wanted to give people some knowledge, give them a structure in which they could try to apply it, but not really penalize them for not following a particular order or system or anything like that. So the most recent version is like very similar to what you're looking at, but it's tweaked a little bit in that there are just a whole bunch of recommended challenges essentially that they can use to gain additional XP and other things that they can apply in whatever ways they want in order to gain points. And it also ties in a little bit with the story, depending on which challenges you master. You will have slightly different outcomes in a certain series of events.
Yeah, that's definitely something I can get. And when it came to the setup with the Arcanum, was it? I think what I'd be wanting to ask is if it was a chicken and egg situation, i.e., when you initially were concepting this, was the idea of heroic callings one of the things you wanted to do from the word go, or was it a thing you stumbled into?
That's a great question. I think it was more of the latter. It was in the back of my head kind of from the beginning, but I really started kind of honing in on it a little bit more as I started to realize that I wanted people to focus a little bit more on one area of their life, because I think a lot of apps, a lot of habit tracking things out there really encourage people to like track everything, to list all of their exercise routines, all of their diet stuff, all of their mindfulness stuff, whatever it might be. And I feel like that's sometimes a little bit too overwhelming, and you bite off more than you can chew, and then you drop it all. And the idea here was just like, no, let's pare it down. Let's keep it simple. What are you feeling right now most called to do in your life? Is it to start an exercise routine? Is it to like start a new creative project? Whatever it might be. And let's just focus on that and run with that and teach you things that might help you actually make some progress in that over a 2 to 3 month period.
Mm-hmm. Which I can definitely see that. And since we're talking about that kind of thing, obviously, not to put too fine a point in it, but art is often a response to other art, and game design is as much an art form as any other art form, even if some art critics refuse to admit it, which is fine. Those kind of people are usually the kind of people who can't handle conversations, if I'm being honest. But just looking at these sort of habit forming exercises, whether it be applications, whether it be books, what would you say were some of the other pitfalls that you've seen besides the game part we mentioned earlier that you wanted to particularly avoid?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest things, which we've already touched on, was like a lack of really eliciting buy-in, of like eliciting a deep sense of being embedded in a world that you actually care about, right? Because I think a lot of the kind of gamified habit things, it's like, oh, you have like a rocket ship and you're trying to launch it to the moon, and the more things you do, you like get points towards making that happen. But it's like, okay, whatever. There's no sense of like mystery, magic, myth. It's all just pretty surface level. So that was something I wanted to avoid. The other thing I would say is this isn't necessarily well, it's related. Is I when I was coming up with the sort of actual gameplay mechanics where you're rolling dice to determine outcomes of events, I had to really find something that I could like hand to my friends who don't play Dungeons and Dragons, and they could understand and roll a dice and figure it out. Because initially I had very much based it off of 5e stuff, and there was a lot of adding of modifiers, and it ended up it was cool, it was fun, but like unless someone was ready to learn 5e, it would be too much. So I had to kind of pare that down and find that fine sweet point between simple enough but still like rewarding and satisfying, and I'm hoping I did that. But it's definitely a challenge to find something that pleases everyone, and hopefully I hit somewhere in between, but I guess we'll see.
Yeah, and obviously trying to please everyone, you please no one. We've all heard that particular truism at some point.
For sure.
But I think just as important is establishing a clear direction. To, as my mentor would say, pick a damn lane.
Yep. Yeah.
And which brings me to the question of what prompted the idea of using role playing, and especially fantasy role playing, to kind of act as the premise, the backdrop for this kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, one kind of interesting insight, and there's some research on this, but like sometimes change is easier if you're less focused on you, and you can kind of take a bit more of a third person perspective. So like if you can view yourself as a character moving through life rather than in first person freaking out about every little thing, that can be a bit of an edge. So in that sense, I really like the idea of being like, all right, what if like for just 3 months, I'm going to pretend to be a fighter who is working on strength, and I need to build these skills to, help defeat this evil force. And will that in some way help me just get a little bit more of a clearer perspective and that kind of added edge that I might need when the times get a little bit tougher. So that was one element of it. And then I'd say the other part is just like, I don't know, man. It's just like doing so much of the habit tracking apps, to-do lists, all of that stuff just gets pretty boring and wears you down over time. And I was kind of done with it. So I just wanted to find some way to make it a little bit more full of joy and life, and sprinkle on a little bit of magic in there as well.
Yeah, I could certainly see that, and I think there's a much bigger conversation to be had about what is it that's the appeal of fantasy, particularly when it comes to genres of storytelling. And
yeah,
I will admit that I'm nowhere near scholarly enough to answer that question as a whole, but if I were to hazard a guess, and I am fully aware that I am pulling things where the sun don't shine with this. Then again, the greatest ideas were done by people who had no idea what they were doing. Is hundreds of years of cultures of fairy tales.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I say fairy tales, I don't just mean what a lot of people think of, or even the Disney-fied version of what people think of, but even something as mundane as the scary stories that we tell around campfires. Not to sound too Midwestern, of course, or
Be my guest.
or even just the weird folklores that are told in some places, like the whole. That's how we end up getting the myth of the alligators in New York sewers, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, that didn't actually happen, but the narrative of it, especially with how dirty the city would get at a certain point. People put two and two together, at least subconsciously. Maybe that's
Yeah.
not the best example, but the point is that kind of background and that kind of thing being in the zeitgeist for centuries, I think helped.
It's there for a reason.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think myth and story and narrative have played like massive roles in the evolution of humans as we know them, and I think that I'm glad you brought this up, because that definitely did factor into my design of this, was sort of the idea that, like, I don't know, that if you just read a concept from psychology or behavioral science or whatever it is, usually it's going to go in one ear and out the other. And my kind of insight was, like, what if we actually embedded these concepts in stories in some way, so that, like, you read a little page-long narrative that in some way illustrates one of these concepts, and then at the back of the book there's like more actual, hard, concrete information about what it is and how to apply it to your life. But why not incept it into your brain a little bit by creating a narrative around it, so that, it might be a little bit easier to call up in your mind, it might have more staying power, all of that sort of stuff.
Pretty much. And when it comes to this, I kind of hinted at this earlier, but since you mentioned that this is a program that's going for several months,
Yep.
There's always a bit of a issue when it comes to getting people to stick to doing certain habits. I mean, not to get too much behind the curtain, but I've worked in like gyms in the past, and everybody both looks forward to and cringes whenever January comes along, and I think you can guess why. All the New Year, New Me people that show up thinking that this year they're going to get in shape, and they only last maybe 2 weeks, maybe a month if you're being generous. So and you've probably dealt with this particular obstacle before, of having people start habits and keep them over a long amount of time.
Yep. It is absolutely a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And I won't claim that this is going to solve everyone who's struggling to build a new habits. It's not going to solve their inability to stick with something, because most of us have that. I mean, that's not to speak down to people who struggle to form habits. I have spent my whole life doing that as well, so relatable. But I think the goal here is to at least provide a framework where there's something that is encouraging you to come back each day, reflect on what it is you're trying to do in life, and give you a couple of like tips and tools of how to build consistency towards doing that. And then by also weaving that into some amount of story, some amount of kind of magic and myth, I'm hoping that the concepts will stick in their head a little bit longer. So even if this time around they fail and they don't actually succeed in that habit that they're trying to build, maybe next time around they get to it, they'll be like, okay, let me actually reopen that book. I remember learning this spell at some point. I think this could help me get back on and succeed again. So it's kind of trying to serve a dual purpose of like help you now, help you if you're ready to do it, but also help you later and give you an object that you can reflect on and come back to if you struggle.
Mm-hmm. Which certainly makes sense. Now, with that in mind, would it be? I kind of hinted at this before, but I do want to dive a little bit into it further. If someone started the program, went through it the whole way through, and then started again maybe a year later, could they build a different experience out of that?
Yeah, I mean, right now, it would be different. It wouldn't be massively different, I would say. Like if they had flipped through the book and read a good amount of it, they're not going to have a fundamentally different experience of the plot, the narrative, the encounters, the creatures you face. That being said, again, my idea would be to keep this continually updating and release, free PDFs to whoever has already purchased the book so that they can actually have a new novel experience. But again, it just depends on where they dropped off in the process, right? If they dropped off after a couple of weeks or something, or
I
a
didn't mean
week,
dropped off. I meant completed.
Oh, completed it. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. No. So yeah, if they completed it, then I would say 60 to 70% of the stuff that they've already done will be the same. There's not per se like branching decision paths that fundamentally alter the trajectory, other than just that you have a map and you choose where to go in that map, and there are different things awaiting you on each location.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can definitely get that. And when it comes to the die rolling parts, was that something that you had decided you wanted to do from the word go with this? Because I could see the temptation of going diceless.
Yeah, I oscillated back and forth on that a lot. And I ultimately decided to keep the dice in there, just for people who enjoy that element, essentially, because it's not 100% essential. And I think I still need to figure out exactly how to do this, but I do want to make a note somewhere in the book being like, hey, like this is your own journey. This is for you to help yourself and to have some fun doing it. If you want to skip the dice rolling, you can. Like that's not going to fundamentally break it. But I don't know. I think just that adds a bit more of the like it without the dice rolling. A lot of the kind of XP and items and all of that stuff then became a lot more ambiguous and hard to fit in. So I decided to kind of keep it in as a central thing to tie together, why you need items, because it'll buff the dice rolls and various things like that. But it's sort of up to you. Again, this is a very choose your own adventure type thing in both its format and in terms of the spirit of it as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could definitely. I know I say I could definitely see that, but that's just something I end up saying out of habit.
They're hard to break, man. I'm telling you. And hard to build.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure with enough practice I could catch a ball with my opposite hand. I just know that it would take quite a while, and I'd still end up falling for old habits.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
Speaking of that kind of habit forming thing, this being adjacent to fantasy role playing and the like brings up an interesting thing, because one of the big things you hear a lot is how difficult it is for people to learn new systems.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to that idea of it might be too difficult for me to learn a new system or learn a new habit, what has often been your response to that line of thinking?
Well, I mean, there's a couple of things I would say, just in terms of like, and you're talking about habits specifically, not necessarily learning like a new game system or something like that, correct?
It's one that leads into the other.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, in terms of habits, I think it's hard when, let's say, someone who's like not a runner, not a whatever, not an artist, and you're like, okay, I want to become that, but I feel like there's so much distance between where I am now and where I want to go.
Motherfucker.
Starting to think of yourself as someone who does that thing is kind of a crucial first step, and it really only takes.
Yeah,
Every action you take is a vote towards like the person that you're trying to become.
Mm-hmm.
So you just take a couple of steps and you are already a runner, right?
Yeah.
It's not that hard to get going. So I don't know. My general advice is just like, hey, like no pressure, but try it a couple of times, see how it makes you feel. And then like I would encourage them to really, and this is part of why there's a lot of space for journaling in this book itself, is that you'll pretty quickly notice that whatever you're doing gives you some rewards, right? Like you'll either start feeling better, or if you're working on relationships, you'll like have better time with friends, family, whatever it might be. So there's a lot of like juice to be squeezed along the way as you're building up things. It's not all pain and suffering and hard work. There's joy and and some magic along the way as well, which actually that's another thing that I forget exactly what question you asked me, but I wanted to really kind of lean into magic in this whole book because of this sort of insight that, like, I don't know, the human mind's ability to create a vision of what you want to become or what you want to see in the world, and then actually take concrete steps to make that happen, that like seems about as close to magic as we can get. So why not frame like goal setting and all these other types of habit spells as magic, because they're kind of crazy if you think about them enough.
Yeah, I could see it, especially given how superstitious some people are when it comes to doing certain operations. And we've all made the joke at least once about how nobody touches anyone else's dice because that's bad luck, and some people are cursed when it comes to their dice.
Yep.
We've all either known that person or been that person where no matter what, whenever the roll actually counts, we botch it.
Yep. Happens to the best of us, and sometimes once it starts happening, it sticks.
Mm-hmm. I remember when I first heard the term "there are no atheists in foxholes," I immediately went, that can apply just as much to the gaming table.
Fair enough.
And I know I can say I know at least one of my friends who he will ardently refuse to the point of ridiculousness anyone else's dice. He'll have bags and bags of his own dice, and that is the only thing he will ever roll.
It's too funny, yeah. Well, maybe he's onto something, and maybe he's just superstitious. Who knows?
I do know that because of my gimmick, I've been asked to bless people's dice at least once.
Well, you've got quite the monk's blessing, I'm sure.
Yeah. I usually tell them I can't do that because the dice gods hate you, but they hate everyone equally.
Yeah, you're not alone.
Mm-hmm. In fact, I find them a model of true equality because it doesn't matter your background; they hate you anyways.
The dice are uncaring, cold entities.
No, but every now and again they play nice. So carrying cold and somewhat mercurial.
Exactly.
But and I will admit I first started making that joke because of my time with XCOM. If you've ever played any game in that series, XCOM is infamous for its frankly bullshit RNG. You know, point blank range says 98% chance to hit, still miss.
Okay. Nice.
You know, it's that kind of thing. And I know why it is technically the 98% chance isn't actually 98%. It's more like 68. But that's a cold comfort to the person playing it.
And never landing a hit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I did also see the side quest thing, and I'm curious with these if you plan on releasing those as a separate thing to like print and play.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm working. Well, so first they will definitely be printable PDF with like outlines that you can cut out yourself and kind of form your own deck. But I'm hoping to also get an actual deck of cards made that you can draw them from. Yeah. So that's definitely on the agenda. And again, that would be another area of kind of variety and replayability. Is there could be different side quest decks further along the road, because these are sort of all-purpose, like they're agnostic to what it is that you're focusing on in your life. Like there will be some that tell you to do something different in terms of your physical activities. There'll be something that'll tell you to do something different with regards to social interactions, whatever it might be. But I would love to create additional kind of more class specific, more focus specific side quests that, if you're just working on physical routines, then you've got side quests for that. And if you're working on becoming an artist, you've got ones for that, whatever it might be. That's kind of the long-term vision there.
Especially since each of the archetypes you have six areas of specialization in their entry. So having that have something more tangible would be certainly worth going into.
Yep. And those six, I'll also note, those are they're recommended. Like those are it's really at the end of the day up to you what you want to focus on and how that relates to the class that you picked. But they're kind of recommended clusters of sort of related behaviors that I think would make sense for you to focus on. But you can expand that should you desire.
Yeah. I can get that. And I do also appreciate that you put in a bunch of references with several of the scrolls.
Yep. So all the scrolls are like that's me putting on my behavioral science hat and doing some fairly in-depth literature reviews, trying to figure out what actually works and what I think I can impart to people that'll have the most impact on their life in the shortest amount of information that they need to ingest, essentially.
Yeah, it makes sense. And with that in mind, I know the Kickstarter isn't out yet. When do you plan on launching the Kickstarter? Is that still being discussed?
No, the current launch date is set for March 31st, so in just a little over 2 weeks now. That being said, I'm still out there on social media, trying to get the word out about this, trying to generate some organic interest. Also, doing interviews with folks like you and trying to spread the word a little bit. But if I don't feel like we're quite at the point where I can actually have a successful launch, I might push it out another couple of weeks, depending, and reorient a little bit on the marketing strategy side of things. But yeah, right now it is set to launch for March 31st, unless something else changes.
I could certainly get the vibe of that. And with the Kickstarter, you plan on having it run for about 30 days?
Yeah, a little under 30 days. I think we were looking at 25. Yeah, 25.
Yeah, I could see it. And I'm guessing, as far as a release window, are you thinking of like fall or early winter? Basically.
Yeah, it's looking more like early fall to late summer, actually, is what we're shooting for. But I want to give enough runway, especially with all of the complexities that are kind of going on with with tariffs and all of that. I need to make sure I'm thinking through all of the logistics side of things as well. So there's some unknowns there, but working through them.
Yeah. The only thing I can't relate to on that is the existence of a season called fall.
Yeah, there you go.
I don't have that
Yeah.
around here. I have in between season, which lasts about 2 weeks.
And then just brutal cold season as Minnesota digs her claws into you.
Old man winter doing that and lasting all the way until March, and then being that one guy in the bar who, even though it's closing time, he still won't leave because he has that one drink he's lasted for like 7 hours. He's like, I'm not leaving until I finish my drink.
For sure. I can see it in my mind's eye right now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm also curious, just from your perspective. I don't know, how do you see this fitting into the broader space of, TTRPGs, choose your own adventure? Like, do you see this as being something that you or someone that you know would want to pick up? How do you see it kind of fitting in?
I see this fit. I know this may sound a bit odd, but I don't necessarily see this fitting in the TTRPG end of things, as much as things like solo games and journaling games. A lot of what we've gone over is something that is not far removed from those kind of affairs. Some elements of the story gaming scene as well, which is a different kettle of fish. But something that I think should be considered at some point. I'm not saying put this in as a follow-up or put this in the core book or anything like that, but some sort of variant sometime down the road of multiple people utilizing the system
Simultaneously, you're talking about, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah.
Essentially using it as a group activity. That would kind of bring this a little more into the TTRPG end of things. As is,
yes.
It's more akin to a solo game, which was kind of already lampshaded when you brought up Choose Your Own Adventure.
Yes, it was. Yeah, and I think I just say the kind of TTRPG/RPG thing because more people are familiar with it, and it draws a lot on common lore within that. But yeah, it definitely more squarely fits in the kind of solo journaling type.
As the saying goes, great artists steal, and in this case, I think the steal should be the likes of Lone Wolf, if you're familiar with that game book series.
I've heard of it. I've not gone through it in detail though.
It is a game book series that was largely based on its creators' D&D campaigns. Eventually, there was a multiplayer variant of it. There's been a couple different TTRPGs. Most recently, it's going to be getting an adaptation into the Dragonbane rule set, which honestly is a natural fit. It was a far more natural fit than trying to adapt it into D20 back in like the early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, nothing against D&D, but it was a case of square peg, round hole.
Sure.
And any game that is doing class in the traditional sense, something like Lone Wolf isn't going to fit because you're playing as a Lord of Kai. But the reason why I bring something like that up is Lone Wolf had its own little setting, and while you certainly have a vibe with Just Roll With It, having some sort of pseudo setting in the future might be something worth looking into to create a degree of tangibility, even if that setting is just exaggerated real world things, which is most settings anyways.
Sure. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean it does. It is taking place within a fictional realm. This area of a realm called Glimmerwood, and there is some amount of world building in that where you get some references to particular places and particular characters that kind of pop up. But yeah, I agree that that's again, that was a challenge. Is having limited space in a hard copy, smallish journal to actually flesh out a super big world. Which again, I guess that could kind of come in later rounds with downloadable content and all of that stuff. But yeah, point taken. Would love to build on this world a little bit more and make it a little more concrete that people can really sink their teeth into.
Yeah. I can certainly get that. But with that said, I do want to sincerely thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come all the way to my monastery and enjoy the madness that happens around here. And
yeah,
anytime
absolutely, it's been my pleasure.
Anytime you see fit to return, the door is always open. As I often say around here, drinking is not mandatory, but it is encouraged.
Fair enough, and cheers to that.
Mm-hmm. And of course, a sincere thanks goes out to everyone who took the time out of their schedule to come into the show and enjoy the madness. And there will be plenty more where that came from, as there always is here on the open bar of the internet. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody.
Thank you.